Welcome to the third season of the Connor and Heffernan Show. My name is Mark. My co-host Montana here. If you guys are by chance checking us out on the Yankee and the Brit YouTube channel, make sure you click on the link in the description below. That'll get you to the full episode. Let's kick things off, man. So obviously Thursday Night Football happened. Oh my gosh, my boys, the Green Bay Packers, got absolutely dismantled. It wasn't anywhere as close as the score showed at the end of the game. The Lions got off to like a 27-3 lead. It was absolutely crazy. And the big question was, is Jordan Love, really that breath of fresh air that the Packers need right now? And I think he still has a long ways to go. That team just dug themselves in such a huge hole early on to overcome. They started playing better toward the end of the game. I think you can draw that up to the Lions are probably playing more people. What are your thoughts on this Packers team? Do you think they could potentially make the playoffs at the end of the year, or do you think they're maybe a year or two away of development when it gets to, developing their talent?
You know what? I think this is the first time that we can say the Packers are the team that is going to be out of the playoffs and the Lions are the team that is going to be in, because the Lions look like a contender. I'm not trying to turn this into talking about the Lions, but how can you not when they beat the Packers 34-20, a team that has been beating up on them pretty well, except, of course, the Lions got the last laugh last season, beating Aaron Rodgers, beating him his final game against them, getting that last laugh. But before that, the Packers were cleaning house, and Aaron Rodgers owned the Lions, just like he owned the Bears, just like he owned all those teams when he played for the Packers. He was owning the Lions pretty handily. So this is a complete flip-flop. I will say this. I think that Love is going to be the guy for the Packers, but this is not a Favre to Rodgers handoff. This is not anything close to that. This is going to take Love time to develop, and he might not be the guy for Green Bay. We might see him be moved eventually. I think he will develop and be the guy, but it's going to take time. And who's to say they're willing to wait that long? I don't know if Green Bay is going to be willing to wait for as long as it's going to take, because I think this is a rebuild. I'm going to say I think this is a rebuild. I'm going to say it right now. I think that the Packers, it's not a complete rebuild, but it's a pretty big rebuild. And the Lions have arrived. And I think that they are absolutely one of the best teams in the NFC. And shout out to Goff, because I feel like a lot of people counted him out when he got shipped out of LA. I think a lot of people were like, Goff is the problem. Goff is a big issue. Goff cannot lead a team. If anything, he's proving everybody wrong. Did people forget he led a team to the Super Bowl? I get that was the most boring. Oh my gosh, bro. Do you remember that Super Bowl? Because I don't, because I was asleep for a lot of it. That was so boring.
It was boring.
It was a forgettable Super Bowl and another Tom Brady W. But still, Goff led a team to a Super Bowl. Goff is the real deal. Shout out to him. He's having a great season so far. He put up a pretty solid performance. I will actually say that Jordan Love did outperform him yards-wise last night, but he did have an extra interception on Goff. So, of course, that you overlook the yards when we look at those interceptions. And they definitely dismantled that team. That team was dismantled by those turnovers. So the Lions are just a really primed and really well put together team. Shout out to that organization for sticking with Campbell. So many people would have given up on Campbell after the first, not great season, but they didn't. They stuck with him, and it's really paying off. And yes, it's only the beginning of the season. Anything could happen. But name the last time the Lions started the season 3-1, because I don't think it's been the last few seasons.
It definitely hasn't. And like you said, shout out to Goff, because he did pick apart that Green Bay Packers defense at times. I thought the game was going to start off great, because the Packers picked him off within the first 2 minutes of the game. But he wound up completing 19 of 28 for 210, one touchdown, one pick. So not exactly a stat line that's going to blow you away, but he was efficient at dishing out the ball to different receivers. The running game was pretty good too. The Lions are definitely legit. We'll obviously see if they can keep up, their performances throughout the year. But I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that they're probably the favorite in the NFC North at this time.
Oh, no, I think that's just the facts. That's the facts here. And I think a lot of people didn't believe it until they beat the Chiefs. I think that's the real reason that they are here. That was the momentum booster that they needed. That was Travis Kelce was out. I'll give you that. But even when Travis Kelce is in, that team can absolutely still lose games. It's him being in or out doesn't change it as much as a Mahomes being out would change it. So for me, yes, Kelce was out, but the Lions beating the Chiefs on opening day when they're celebrating their Super Bowl, that was them arriving, and they haven't looked back since. And the Packers are not a bad team. Yes, I said they need to rebuild at least somewhat. I don't think it's a complete rebuild. They need to rebuild certain positions or build up. Maybe not rebuild, but build up. Build up certain positions and fill the positions with the people that will really get the job done. And again, I think they're a long ways from being a contender, but I definitely think the Packers could be at least a wild card team within the next 3 years, without a doubt. Within the next 2 years, they definitely could be. I'm not going to write them off for sure this season because I don't think that's 100% fair, but I am kind of saying I don't think the Packers are doing that much this year. I really don't.
Yeah, unfortunately, you may be right. I kind of came into the season thinking it's like, well, if Jordan Love plays a certain way, they might be able to get to this point in the year. He's played decent. He's been serviceable. But again, they need to rebuild a few positions. Obviously, on their offensive line, David Bakhtiari, I don't even know what the heck is going on with him, but he was just put on the IR. It seems like he's hurt way more than he's out there playing the game right now. And he's a former All-Pro offensive lineman. So missing that piece on the offensive line is huge because you miss his experience, and now you're having to play these rookies or people who don't have a lot of professional playing experience in his place, and it's just not good. So, yeah, I think it'll be a couple of years before we legit say the Packers could be a team to compete for the NFC North. Heck, they might still be that team this year if the Lions fall off. I don't think the Vikings or the Bears are going to do anything. We'll talk more on the Vikings and the Bears here in just a little bit. But, I mean, there's a long season left. We've got 13 weeks, 13 more weeks of football here. So, again, we will see. We'll talk more Packers. We'll talk more Lions, obviously, if they keep up this streak. Let's transition over to the Dolphins and the Bills. Obviously, one of the more higher profile games of the weekend. The Miami Dolphins, my God, last week put up 70 points. None of us were alive when a team put up 70 points the last time. The last time that happened was back in 1966. Absolutely crazy. That Broncos team, just terrible. But do you think that performance, pointed Miami in the direction of being extremely relevant, or do you think that was a testament to how bad that Broncos organization is right now?
My answer is, why can't it be both? Because honestly, I think it is both. I think that Broncos organization is abysmal, and we're going to talk more about that. I think that Broncos, and again, I'm a Raiders fan. And one of the only things I currently have, because we just had a terrible game against the Steelers, one of the only things I currently have is the fact that we beat the Broncos opening weekend. And again, I was hype. I was like, oh, the Raiders might actually be a good team. Well, no, actually the Broncos are just one of the worst teams in the NFL. But anyways, Broncos are really, really bad. Broncos are not a good team in the slightest. But the fact that the Dolphins hung 70 up on them is insane. The fact that they could have broken the record had McDaniels gone for a field goal, I get it. I understand that. I get why he didn't. The fact that he could have done that is insane. The distance of time. Okay, I'm not going to say this is a Wilt Chamberlain scoring 100 type of feat, but the amount of time between the times someone has scored this many points, that shows you how impressive this is. You don't score now. College football, absolutely. You'll see 70. You'll see 70. You'll see 90. Oh, what team was it, bro? Did you see that? There was a team that hung 90 up on some team this year. It was some Tech or some. It wasn't a big school, but it was some team. Anyways, college. Okay, I'll give you that. You don't see 70 plus in pro. That is unheard of. So that is a huge feat. And oh yeah, Tua, the quarterback that got so much criticism in the offseason, has had so much criticism since he entered the NFL. He's the guy leading that team. He's the guy that he's not the sole reason they're there, but the quarterback is the leader. I get it. Tyreek Hill is great. But if you don't have the quarterback that can get him the proper ball, if you can't feed him correctly, it's not going to formulate. It's not going to turn into points, touchdown. It's not going to turn into anything, not even a couple of yards. You have to have the right quarterback. Tua is that guy. It's insane. I don't know if you do fantasy football, but I do. And I had the third string for Miami running back, scored 56 points. 56 points. And guess where he was at? My bench.
Oh, man, that is brutal.
I picked him up in the morning because I don't remember why I picked him up. I think I had a player that no, Pacheco was questionable. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick up a backup. And then I see Pacheco's in, so I'm like, I don't need to put him in. Bro. Anyways, so we had third strings putting up 56 points on fantasy. That does not happen. That is insane. Yes, the Broncos are bad, but the Dolphins are also just one of the best teams in the NFL. Now, I feel kind of like, ooh, can I really say that? Because it's only 3 games into the season. They had the exact same record last season. They were 3-0 last year. An insane stat. Tua had the exact same stats last season.
Really?
The exact same completion, everything was the same throughout the first 3 games. I just saw that before we started our show today, which is
my God.
It is ridiculous. It's like, and again, now we know what happened for the rest of their season. That's why I say I don't want to jump the gun too much, but I do think that this Dolphins team, it doesn't stop with Tua and with Tyreek. They have a really solid team outside of that. This Dolphins team is really well put together. So I think this Dolphins team, if I'm being completely honest with you, again, only 3 games in, I think this Dolphins team is the best team in the AFC. And I think they're going to show that against the Bills. I don't think they're going to beat 70, but I think they're going to beat the Bills by 3 touchdowns. That's what I think they're going to get. I think they'll get them by 3.
Going on the Bills sideline here now. So
Good.
Obviously they had that disappointing loss to the Jets opening week. But then they've dropped 38 against the Raiders. Sorry. And then they dropped 37 and absolutely dismantled the Washington Commanders. Are the Bills back? Because I think they've shown what they can do to everyone now. I think week 1 they just kind of sleptwalked through it. The Jets have a pretty good defense, so I'll give them that. But the offense didn't play particularly well. But the last couple of weeks, that offense has really showed out, and so has the defense. Are the Bills back, and potentially are they the best team in the AFC?
You know what? I will give them second. We are seeing this is a battle of the best top two teams in the AFC at the moment. I'll give it to Dolphins at 1, Bills at 2. I think that, the Chiefs, they're right there, and they have the same exact record as the Bills. I believe they're also 2-1. So, because they're 2-1. So, you could give them that, but I think the Bills are better than the Chiefs this season. So far, from what we've seen, I think the Bills are better than the Chiefs.
They've shown more consistency.
Exactly. Now, you want to know the real thing that's going to be interesting is if the Chiefs also lose to the Jets, because they play them I think Sunday Night Football is Chiefs-Jets. So if they also lose to the Jets, then it's like, okay, if they beat the Jets, because again, the Jets had Aaron Rodgers for
4 seconds.
Yeah, they didn't have him. They had it was Wilson for the whole game.
Yep.
So you can't look at it like, well, they had Aaron Rodgers. So it will be interesting. I'm not going to say that's going to determine if the Chiefs are better than the Bills, but I do think the Bills are a better team than they played in the first game. Not my concern, because I'm not a Bills fan. I'm not a Bills hater. Actually, I do like the Bills more than a lot of other AFC teams. I would choose them over quite a few teams, but the Bills are so inconsistent. Josh Allen is super inconsistent, and that is their biggest problem, is their inconsistencies. They are extremely inconsistent, and we saw that in the playoffs last season. Ultimately, in their eventual exit, their eventual exit was early. It was untimely. They shouldn't have exited the playoffs.
They should have been in the Super Bowl.
Yes, they should have been, like they should have been the last 2 seasons, honestly. They should have been that team, and they have not been. And that is because they are inconsistent. But I will give you that they are definitely the second best team in the AFC. And maybe whoever wins this game is the best. I know that because, maybe this is, in my opinion, this is the showdown for who's the best, because
it's the battle of the Titans.
Yeah, right now. It is the battle of the Titans. And now, again, you said the greatest thing you just said is right now, because we're so early in this. We're so early in the season, but that doesn't mean that these teams won't be the best 2 at the end of the season. It's just right now they are undoubtedly the best by far. Again, I said I've got the Dolphins winning by 3. I'm going to go ahead and say, oh, you know what? It's tough. It's a tough one, but I'm going to go ahead and say 35-14 final score.
I am going to flip that. I have the Bills coming out and showing out pretty big. I do think it's going to be higher scoring. I think it's going to be close to the first half. Give me the Buffalo Bills by 14 points toward the end of the game. I got the score 42-28. I think it's going to be higher scoring. I do think that Bills offense is going to find a little bit more consistency. That Dolphins team, though, is going to be tough to stop, which is why I give the Dolphins 28 points. It's going to be one of the higher scoring games of the weekend. Now, games that will not be the highest scoring games of the weekend. We've got 2 battles of 0-3 teams this year. You've got the Broncos, you've got the Vikings, you got the Bears, and you've got the Panthers. So we'll talk Broncos-Bears, which might go down as the worst game ever. Absolutely terrible. They should just both be demoted to the XFL or something. They're truly bad. But unfortunately, one of these teams will get their first win of the season. My gut tells me it is not going to be the Denver Broncos. It's going to be tough, man. Because they're going to Chicago. I think that Chicago fan base is going to be revved up for the game. I do think Justin Fields has played okay at times to start the year. They just had a gauntlet of a schedule to start. So they couldn't really get anything going. There's no excuses for the Broncos to be as bad as they are right now. Well, why don't you take it away, man? What do you think, goes on in this matchup between 2 of the worst teams in the NFL at the moment?
Well, I can tell you one thing. I will definitely not be watching it. I don't have any fantasy players on either of those teams, luckily, so I will not be watching that game. I would only watch it if I maybe had some fantasy but no, I don't. I have no pull in that game. What I will say is this. I have an opposite view of who's going to win. I do think the Broncos are going to win, and I actually think the Broncos are going to beat them pretty handily because the Bears are the worst team in the NFL. I really think they are. I mean, there's no worse team than Chicago right now. Maybe Carolina, but we'll talk about them next. But I don't even think Carolina is. I think that the Bears are by far the worst team. When you look at the Broncos, yes, Russell Wilson is not playing well, and we already know that he's not going to be their quarterback next season. I really don't think, unless they had some insane turnaround and change everything and end up in the playoffs, Russell Wilson is not your quarterback. I don't care how much money you spent on him. After the lack of success, they are going to move on from him next season if nothing changes, which it won't. But he still has had some pretty decent statistical games this season. Yes, they lost against the Commanders, but he did have a pretty good statistical game, and they do have some weapons in Denver. So I give Denver the edge because I do think Denver has actual talent. There is no talent in Chicago. And again, NFL talent is talent because those are the people that they're the best at what they're doing. But when you're talking about NFL talent against other NFL talent, the Bears have very little. They don't have any advantages in positions against any other teams. And Fields, who was sort of making them look kind of okay last year, is doing the exact opposite this year. And if anything, making them look worse. So yeah. The Bears are, in my opinion, are the worst team. I've got the Broncos beating the Bears. I've got, again, is it a super high-scoring game? No, but I do have them winning 21-7. So I do have them putting up a couple touchdowns on them and winning. And I do have it being one of their only wins. I don't think the Broncos will win more than 5. I don't even know if they'll get to 5. So terrible, terrible game. 2 of the worst teams. Looking at the NFC, Panthers versus the Vikings. Now I have an opinion that I know I have set on the Vikings and what they can potentially still do. But are these teams as bad as the Bills, good Lord, as the Bears and Broncos? Or are these teams actually decent teams that can turn it around? Because I think we can both agree Bears and Broncos are not making the playoffs right now. No chance at all. I would bet everything I own on that.
I would bet my life savings on that.
Same, which mine are pretty low already. But
yeah, exactly.
Push them out. I'm pretty confident in that one for sure. I would, because again, look, come on now. But no, between the Panthers and the Vikings, the other 2 0-3 teams that play this weekend, first of all, are either of them going to make the playoffs? Do either of them have a shot? And second of all, who's winning this game?
So as far as do I think one of these teams can make the playoffs, I do think the Vikings make the playoffs at the end of the year. As we have seen, the Vikings have been a decent team this year. They just had a round of bad luck after round of bad luck in their first 3 games. You look at Kirk Cousins' stats. He's 96 of 138, 1,075 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 picks. He's been more than serviceable for this offense to start the year. They're not running the ball particularly well. They've got their top running back right now, 39 carries for 155 yards. So they need to start running the ball a lot more. But I do think the Vikings have way too much talent on their team to not make the playoffs at the end of the year. So I think they're the team that turns it around. As far as the Carolina Panthers go, I think they could be pretty tough in that division too, but I still think they're 2 or 3 years away from being a real contender in the NFC. I do think they will get that organization turned around to where it should be because they obviously haven't made the Super Bowl since 2016. So it's been a little bit. So yeah, I do think out of the 2 teams, the Vikings are the one that make the playoffs at the end of the year. Will they win the division? Well, that remains to be seen. But I do think they at least lock down a wild card at the end of the year. What are your thoughts?
It would be insane if they didn't. I know the episode 1 of season 3, I said Vikings are one of the best teams in the NFC, and now they're 0-3. What I will say is this: I still think that they are one of the best teams in the NFC, and it shows in their quarterback, Kirk Cousins, who leads the league, and it also shows in, of course, you can't say Minnesota Vikings without Justin Jefferson, who's ranked second going into the season of the top 100 players in the league. So obviously his name carries a lot of weight. And so far, he is one of the top 2 receivers in the NFL this season. He's playing phenomenally. I'll give the edge to Tyreek, especially because they're on the flip side of 0-3. They're 3-0. So I'll give it to Tyreek, but I will say that he definitely is number 2. He's not lower than number 2. He's by far one of the best receivers. So this Minnesota team is too good not to turn it around.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen teams flip it around. We've seen teams flip it around way later in the season than after the first 3 games. But I do think Minnesota wins. Carolina, I'm not even going to waste my breath. And it's not because I don't think that they're going to figure it out. I do think that they'll become a good team. They've got some talent, but they've got so much time, and they've got so much that they need to do before they're going to be a team to talk about, that it's not even, I mean, they're not making the playoffs.
I still think they're going to be a tough out for most anybody they play, though.
They always are. That's the thing about Carolina. They're always a tough opponent. And if you are teetering on playoff contention, they'll knock you out.
They'll play spoiler pretty easily.
No, they will. They're one of those teams that has done that ever since Cam Newton left the first time, because the second time doesn't count, because I don't even really know what we would call those couple of games he played with them. But when he first left, ever since then, it's just not been the same. But they still are a team that's tough and will always play you and will always spoil your dreams if they can. So I will say that the Panthers will play them tough. I don't have it being a 3-score difference like I do that Broncos Bears game, but I will say I do have the Vikings winning. I think this is going to be a small scored game. I don't think we're going to go high up with this one. I think this is going to be a low scoring, very defensive game. Obviously, we've seen some defensive struggles, but I still think that we're going to see the defenses show up against each other, and it's going to be just NFC is brutal, physical, tough football, and that's what this is going to be. I have it being a 14-21 victory for the Minnesota Vikings, and I have the Vikings getting that first win of the season, and I have this being the win that kind of turns it around, and they kind of get that ship turned around going back the right way again. So I don't think there's any way this Minnesota team is going to lose, but I could be wrong.
I've kind of got a similar prediction for this game, except it's just a little bit higher scoring. Give me the Vikings winning 24-17. I do think the Panthers keep it close, but I do think the Vikings also get back on track. Let's transition over to the Cincinnati Bengals right now. They have started 1-2. Now, granted, they started 0-2 each of the last, I think, couple of seasons, and they've made the AFC Championship game. But in my opinion, this 0-2 does not feel the same as the last couple of years. Joe Burrow is dealing with a calf injury right now. He hasn't exactly been 100% to start the year. They just got the win against the Rams. So are the Bengals going to be back? Does that all depend on if Burrow comes into this week fully healthy? They obviously play the Titans, which is a winnable game. I think this Bengals team is still really good. They're one of the, I think, in my opinion, top 5 teams in the AFC on paper anyway. I do think they'll get it turned around. Do you think they beat the Titans this week to where it changes that narrative, or it kind of changes their trajectory of the season? Or do you think the Titans beat the Bengals this week and it kind of flips everything on its head?
I mean, that's a very interesting question because I think that this game against the Titans kind of determines the rest of their season. If they drop this game against the Titans, I think you can forget AFC Championship. I'm not going to say you can forget wild card because I do think there'll be a wild card team regardless. But I think if they drop this game to the Titans, you can forget saying AFC Championship. And if you ask me, because we don't know for sure if Burrow's back, last I checked, he had done some practicing, but he still was not official for the game this weekend. If Burrow is out or is back but not 100%, and you're playing against a Titans team that, honestly, yes, the Titans don't have the greatest quarterback leading their team. But if you look beyond the quarterback, which is really hard, like I said, you have to have a good quarterback to be extremely successful. If you look beyond the quarterback, the Titans are quietly one of the best teams in their conference with the talent they have on their team. So that Titans team is no joke. The Bengals are down right now. The Bengals may have beat the Rams, but you lost to the Ravens 27-24, and you got stomped by the Browns.
Against the Browns.
That is the one that really set the tone for where we're at now. It doesn't matter that you could beat the Rams by 3 points. You lost to the Bengals by 20 plus points. Or excuse me, to the Browns by 20 plus points. And I'm sorry, but I'm not sure if you know about the Browns, but they're not the most successful team in the league, and they haven't been consecutively. So the fact that the Bengals lost to the Browns by that much after paying Burrow, whoa, that right there set the tone. And then you lose to the Ravens. And then, you beat the Rams. But I don't have them beating the Titans. If I'm being completely honest, I think it's going to be a close game, especially if Burrow plays. But I've got the Titans winning. And then you look at them playing. They've got the Cardinals. Are the Cardinals great? No. But the Cardinals beat the Cowboys, a team that we both talked about last episode having the best defense in this. And again, I still think that the Cowboys absolutely do. But the Cardinals beat them. So the Bengals, I'll give them the Cardinals. I do think they'll be able to beat the Cardinals. But then you've got the Seahawks on October 15th. I don't think you're beating the Seahawks. And then the 49ers the following weekend, I don't think you're beating the 49ers.
And then the Bills. It's a gauntlet.
It is. And then the Texans. So if we're being completely honest, when I look at their next 6 games, the only 2 games that I can guarantee that they could win, that's against the Cardinals and the Texans. That means they're losing against the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Bills, and the Titans.
Brutal.
Now, brutal. And then you look even beyond that. Ravens again. And then the Steelers, they might have picked up steam by then because they already have picked up a little bit of steam from their first really embarrassing loss. The Steelers already look better. Okay, it's not going to be easy. And then you're looking in December games. So up until December, this Bengals team has an extremely difficult schedule. And I can only see them 100% pulling off and winning that Texans and Arizona game. Could they pull off and win more? Absolutely. There's no way that they couldn't also beat the Seahawks and the Titans. But I don't have them beating the 49ers and the Bills. And I definitely don't have them beating the 49ers.
It just all depends on if Burrow's healthy.
That's the big – Burrow's health is huge. And I will say this. I can definitely see them, because of their schedule, even if he is ready to go, holding him out one more week to prevent a further injury. Now, I do think if he's ready to go, he will play. But if he's healthy, if you know how it goes, if it's like he's done a little bit of practice, but we're not sure, I think if he's at that point, I don't think they play him because I think he's too important for the rest of their season. And if he gets a more serious injury, they're not even in the wild card.
No.
This is the thing. A damaged, not super explosive Burrow with his weapons, with that team, is a wild card team. You take Burrow out, they're not even a wild card team. So I think that the Bengals are kind of on the downslide. Will that last? I don't think so. I think that we'll see them bounce back within the next few years and be back in the AFC Championship. And maybe they do that this season, but I don't think that happens.
It just depends on Joe Burrow's health. And as far as this week, if Burrow plays, I've got two different predictions this week for this game. If Burrow plays and he is close to 100%, give me the Bengals against the Titans 27-17. I do think the Bengals will win if Burrow is in there and he does what he can do when he's almost fully healthy. If he doesn't play, I'm going to go reversing on that score prediction. The Titans 27, Bengals 17. I don't think the Bengals will do a whole lot without Burrow in there. It's going to put them in a tough spot. Let's kind of transition over here to our biggest surprises so far of the season. There have been quite a few of them. Why don't you go ahead and start us off here? What are your biggest surprises in the NFL this year?
Yeah, so a couple of positive ones. One of my biggest positive surprises is how, and I'm actually wearing the jersey right now, not the jersey of this player, but I'm wearing my Tom Brady Bucks jersey. I always have people ask me why I own this because I'm not a Bucks fan, but I don't know. I just like the jersey. That's usually my answer. I will also say I'm a big fan of the Tom Brady Bucks era. I will say that. That's usually my answer. But Bucks are looking great. And I say I'm surprised only because after losing Tom Brady, that player that really brought them that notoriety and brought them that brief stint of looking like a top NFC team, there was a lot of belief that they were going to slide and drop, and that picking up Baker Mayfield was a sign of them not giving up, but understanding that they weren't going to be as successful. So far, he has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC. He, not just in his division, in his conference, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC. He's played incredibly well. That defense has played well. Other than Tom Brady and a player like Antonio Brown and Gronk and a couple other players and a Julio Jones who was never even healthy for them anyway, that Bucks team has the same core that they won the championship with. They are not a slouch by any means. They are still that team that we need to pay attention to. So we got to give them their flowers. I've got to give the Bucks their flowers. I think they're going to potentially be a deep playoff contending team if they stay healthy. Looking on the negative side, it doesn't even have to do with on-field play. It actually has to do with an off-field situation. But a Raider of mine, Chandler Jones, he is a former Patriots Super Bowl winning defensive player who is extremely explosive, played with the Cardinals. He's been with the Raiders for a couple of seasons, and it's been known there was some incident when he was with the Patriots, but it wasn't a big deal. There was something that happened outside of a police station. They said he showed up and he was on they found out he was on something and he showed up outside, and that was the only situation that's happened. But then he's been going on social media rants, posting crazy things, conspiracies about Aaron Hernandez being killed by Josh McDaniels and all these things, and just really, really concerning things. And I'm going to be honest, he is getting towards the back half of his career. First of all, it's concerning for him and his mental health, and that's just terrible. But it also, he was going to be one of those vets that was going to give us strength on our defense. And now not only is he off the rail for himself personally, that is dismantling our defense. And I think our defense would be a lot more complete with him on it. So those are my top two surprises. I've got a couple more, but I want to hear, what are your top two, bro?
It's been an interesting start to the year, but I'm going to go with the group here. This division has been notorious for being the worst division in all of the NFL the last couple of years. I'm going to go with pretty much the entirety of the NFC South. I think you're seeing the Falcons they're starting to dig out of their hole that they got themselves into the last couple of years. The Saints are looking pretty good. And as well as the Buccaneers, And we'll even throw the Panthers in there too, because I do think the Panthers are still a pretty tough team. So I think seeing the NFC South come back up has been pretty refreshing to see, because it's been a little bit. And then transitioning over to a team, the Detroit Lions. Who cannot have the Detroit Lions on their list at this point in the year? They've done everything and then some to start this season. Question is, will they keep it up? Well, I guess we will find out. That'll be answered here later on down the road. But the Lions may be one of the favorites in the NFC at the end of the year if they continue playing up to the level that they're playing at right now. And then I'm going to transition over to the 49ers too. The 49ers have been really good to start the year. Their defense is legit, and I do think their offense is pretty good too. Those are my main three. The NFC South being pretty good to start the year. You got the 49ers and the Lions. I think those are pretty decent picks at this point in the year.
Absolutely. No, those are great. Looking at the, I'll go back to the negative side on my end, a couple more negative surprises because those are all good. And again, the Falcons, who would have thought? They look like a team. They look like an absolute force. Who would have thought? So
their rushing offense is good.
Oh, yeah, that's what's making them so great. They look incredibly dangerous. Their rushing offense is solid. So going over to some more negative surprises. Obviously, we've already touched on this, and anyone that follows the sports world to any capacity has seen this, but the Aaron Rodgers injury, whether you are a Jets fan or not, it is really sad to see a player of his stature go down like that, especially so early in the season and at his age. It is really sad to see that. That could be a career-ending injury, and for a lot of players it would be. I don't think it is for him, but you never know. We just don't know how the rehab process is going to go or any of that. So that was obviously a negative surprise. And then again, for me, I don't know if I can say this is a negative surprise. It actually is a positive surprise for me, but a surprise that most would call negative, at least in a certain fan base, would be the Cardinals pulling off that upset against the Cowboys. Talk about, that's the biggest upset of the season. 28-16. We were sitting here, and it was mainly me. I was here like, oh, Cowboys are going to blah, 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 blah. But I thought they were going to be 4-0 when they went up against I thought they were going to be 4-0 and continue that, looking at that schedule going forward. And they are now sitting with a loss against, of all teams, the Cardinals. So that's a negative surprise. But if you're a fan like me, you don't like the Cowboys. So we're going to call that a positive surprise if you ask me. But definitely a lot of surprises, and there's plenty of NFL season left. I think we're going to see a lot of changes in who's who, a lot of changes in the standings. And when we touch back, I bet you we already are going to have even more teams to talk about in the mix, because the NFL season is long. We are nowhere near even halfway. We have so much football left to be played, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I'm here for it too, man. It should be an exciting NFL season. Obviously, we'll touch more on the NFL next episode. Let's transition over to the college game right now. We've got some pretty decent matchups to go, look forward to this weekend. Let's open up with the Georgia Bulldogs and the Auburn Tigers. Auburn's 3-1. You've got the Georgia Bulldogs, who don't need any introduction. They're the number one team in the country for a reason. And it's a rivalry game to kind of start conference play for these two teams. What are your thoughts on this game? Do you think the Georgia Bulldogs pull away in this game, because they do open up as a 14.5-point favorite on the road against Auburn? Or do you think this Auburn fan base and this Auburn team is going to be ready for these Bulldogs and kind of, take them to the fourth quarter, and we'll see what happens then?
So here's the thing. There are some teams out there that are undefeated that look really good record-wise, but they've had some games where it's been close. Their record doesn't show the level of football they've played. But when we look at a team like Georgia, they have had no issue handling their teams they've played to start their season. They have looked phenomenal. We're talking about 48-7 in their first game, 45-3 in their second game, 24-14 in their third game, 49-21 in their. They look phenomenal. It's not like these games are close. They are by far the best looking team in college football right now. So yes, Auburn is 3-1. But if you look at who Auburn's played, if you also look at who Auburn is top to bottom, Georgia is a better team. Georgia is the best team in their conference. And like I just said, I think they're the best team in college football. I think that they, by far, at the moment, will that stand? Will they be the national champions? Who knows? But I think at the moment, Georgia's the best team in college football. So I think they handle Auburn pretty easily. I think now, is it going to be a blowout in the sense of for example, not to talk NFL anymore, but we're going to go to like a blowout of the proportions of a Broncos Dolphins game? No, it's not going to be a blowout where it's an insane 30+ point different game. That's not going to be the case. It's going to be competitive. They're going to fight for the first 3 quarters, but then Georgia's going to pull away. I've got Georgia winning by 2 touchdowns, and I have them finishing this game 35-21, and continuing their run, continuing their record, continuing their streak, and continuing to look like the best team in college football.
That's a really good pick. I do think it's going to be a really competitive game for the first 3.5 quarters. I do think Georgia has way too much depth for Auburn to contend with right now. I mean, they've shown that. Each of the last couple of years, they're probably the season's favorite to three-peat in the college football playoff this year, which they'd be the first ever team to do so. I've got the game a little bit closer, though. I do think Georgia tacks on another touchdown in the waning minutes of the game. Give me Georgia 24-14. I do think Auburn's going to be very competitive. I do think it's going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game, much of what you would expect in a rivalry game. I do think Auburn comes ready to play, and I do think they'll shock people by how well they play for the first 3.5 quarters. They just don't have the depth to contend with the number 1 team in the country this year. Let's transition over to another game. It's the USC Trojans, number 8 in the country, going to Boulder and playing Colorado on Big Noon kickoff. We all saw what happened to Colorado last week. They got absolutely dismantled against Oregon. They couldn't do anything. Do you see a lot of the same going up against USC? Because I know my answer. I think I know yours. Do you think it's going to be a lot of the same this week? Will it be tough sledding for the Buffs?
Yes, it will. I do give them a few more points than they had against Oregon. I do think they'll figure it out a little bit more on the offensive side, but USC's offense is going to run it up on them. They are going to absolutely, USC's offense is going to run it up on that.
It's personal.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That defense is not very good. That defense is not.
The offense is gonna score a lot of points, though.
Score a lot. So I do have Colorado scoring 10, but on the flip side, I do have USC scoring 42-48. So I have it being 42 or 48-10. I don't know exactly where I'm set on. I have them getting in the 40s, and I have the Buffs getting at least into the 10s. I think they'll score a touchdown and 1 field goal, and that'll be it. That'll be early in the game. They'll think they're doing all right, and then USC will lay it on pretty thick.
That's a good pick. But I'm going to give the Buffs a few more points than that. because we've all seen the USC Trojans defense. They have given up points. They have given up yards. Give me USC 50-28. I do think the Trojans drop a 50 bomb on them. I do think they give up 4 touchdowns, but I think the speed of the USC Trojans offense is going to be too much for that Buffs defense to contend with.
There's no way that defense is going to be ready to stop that offense. I will say USC is not as dominating as like a Georgia has been against their opponents to start the season. So they don't look quite as, big and quite as opposing. But I do think this is where we'll see that USC defense really start to take shape. I think this will be their game this will be their wake-up game, because that offensive line for Colorado is terrible. So
it's terrible. And I do think USC will feast on that a little bit.
Even with a more mid defense, they're going to feast on that, because that offensive line is extremely breakable. And Shedeur, as talented as he is, he's not able to get the ball out of his hands or break away in time when that line breaks apart right away. So I think defense, we're going to see that defense eat the most they have potentially this season. Maybe.
Yeah. It's going to be tough for them. And I think if they get blown out again, I think that hype train that has been going around that team is kind of going to dwindle a little bit more, especially if they get blown out at home against USC, because I'm going to pull up their schedule real quick, because it doesn't get any easier after this. You've got Arizona State in Arizona State. You've got Stanford, who can be tough. You've got UCLA, who was just recently ranked, but they lost against Utah. And it was a close game. You've got number 19 Oregon State. Then you play Arizona. Then you've got number 16 Washington State and Utah to round up the year. It is a tough schedule. The Pac-12 is extremely tough right now. And the Colorado Buffaloes, as they sit right now, they may be barely mid-tier Pac-12 team right now. They might be even a little bit below that. They're not as good as their record shows. Can they make a bowl game? Yes, maybe. Will that be a huge improvement over last year? Absolutely. Anything is an improvement over a 1-11 year last year. But the question is, after how they started the season, you had all these Colorado Buffalo fans like, oh, we're going to be one of the best teams in college football. They're not that good. They're not. I mean, just putting my Nebraska fandom aside and hatred for Colorado football, they don't have the depth. They have decent athletes, on the perimeter for their offense, but their interior offensive line play is terrible. Terrible. It's not anywhere near where it needs to be top of the Pac-12. And it showed up against Oregon last week. And I had people who I know that are Colorado fans message me, and they're like, well, it was Oregon. And I'm like, yeah, all I heard was your fan base saying, oh, we're going to beat Oregon in Autzen Stadium. It's personal. That just makes me laugh. I'm like, there is not a more delusional fan base in the country right now than Colorado. And you can kind of thank thank Dion for that. Because he kind of brought that hype train, and it's kind of brought a reality TV show theme to Colorado, because everybody is covering them. Everybody. And it's terrible. You watch a College Game Day episode, you watch Big Noon Kickoff before the games kick off in the morning. It's all Colorado. And it's going to be all of the same on Big Noon Kickoff on Saturday. It's tough, man. It's it's really tough. And I'm like, what's it going to take for them to get blown out, 2 or 3 more times this year to be like, okay, maybe they're not as good and we won't talk about them as much? Or will it take this weekend getting absolutely dismantled by the number 8 team in the country in USC, who potentially could make the college football playoff this year? Will it take them losing back-to-back games like that to kind of lose, steam on that hype that has been following this team for the last 3-4 weeks? I guess we'll figure out that answer pretty quickly. But yeah, give me the USC Trojans 50-28. I do think the Trojans offense is going to be too much for that defense to handle. Caleb Williams is going to have himself a Heisman type game. He will feast on that defense. Let's transition over to another interesting game this weekend. It is number 24 Kansas, 4-0, against number 3 Texas, 4-0. The last time Kansas beat Texas, let me mention, it was in Austin, Texas, the last time Kansas beat them. What is your pick for this Kansas-Texas game? Because Kansas is really good. And I think if any team beats Texas, I think Kansas can do it.
I'm with you. I think it's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to go back and forth, even though I will give the edge to Texas because I do really think they are a solid team this year. We've been tricked by them before where they've had decent starts, where they've beat mid-level teams. But when you're beating a team like Alabama, even though we just asked last episode, is the Saban era almost done? When you're beating a team like Alabama, when you're beating those top-ranked teams, you've arrived. The whole thing you have to do is continue that. I do think Texas is going to, but I think it's going to be a shootout. And if we see Texas start to slip up, Kansas is absolutely going to eat up those opportunities, and they're not going to let Texas walk away with this one. So I have it being a 3-point game. I have Texas winning with a late field goal. They get one last. I had give them one last drive.
Okay.
I have given one last drive. They take it down, kick a field goal, win 31-28. That's my prediction. I think Texas walks away. And our next segment, we talk about our predictions for who's going to be in the college football playoffs. I'm going to give y'all a sneak peek. I think Texas continues this all. Not that I want them to, because I'm a Nebraska guy, but I think they continue this all the way to the college football playoffs. I do.
That's a pretty decent pick, man. But I'm gonna go on the opposite side of the spectrum right now. Kansas is going into Austin as a 16.5-point underdog, according to the Caesar Sportsbook. Kansas's offense is averaging 463 yards a game. They are one of the more, potent offenses because, yeah, they can throw the ball, but they're also averaging 218 rushing yards a game. Oh, and by the way, the defense is pretty good too, giving up only about 296 a game. I think Daniels, he's a dual threat guy for Kansas. I think he's going to put up some pretty good numbers in this game. Give me Kansas staying undefeated, beating Texas at home 35-28. I do think Kansas scores a late touchdown in the waning minutes of the game, and I do think their defense does enough to hold on. Give me Kansas potentially being a dark horse at the end of the year.
Wow, hey, you know what? I'll take it, man. We got two different takes on this one. We got late drives being the winner of this on both sides. I think we can both agree, that being said, that this is going to be a battle. This is not going to be an easy one game for either team.
Kansas is good.
Yeah, oh yeah, this is the best they've been in years. This is by far the best they have been. And the fact that we're even talking about them and they're even ranked, that says a lot. They're 23rd?
24th.
24th. So, I mean, the fact that they are even in the mix is impressive. And are they your TCU type of team from last year?
If if they can beat Texas tomorrow in Austin, I think they very well could be. What Leipold is building down there at Kansas right now is special. And I do think this has the feeling of, those teams back in like 07, 2008, where Kansas was ranked in the top 10 on a pretty consistent basis. I think it has that feeling because, like I alluded to, their offense is pretty potent. Their defense is really good too. Like, they can do everything. So can Texas, but I'm going with Kansas in this one. It's kind of hard to go up against them right now. They're kind of my Cinderella team. And if they can pull it off, they'll be 5-0. And they'll likely be ranked in the low teens to start next week, which will be crazy. And you know what? Colorado had all that hype going in their first 3 weeks. Get me on that Kansas hype train if they pull it off. I'm all aboard for that. So, again, it's going to be a battle. You've got Texas. I've got Kansas. I think Kansas pulls it off. You think Texas pulls it off. It'll be interesting to see. We'll see. That game kicks off at 2:30 on ABC tomorrow. Now we'll transition over to our college football playoff picks. This is going to be interesting, man. Why don't you kick it off? Because you already teased Texas. You think Texas is going to be in there?
I sure do. I think I'll just go. I'll rattle them off right now, bro. I think it's going to be Georgia. Georgia's the obvious pick. I think, like I said, unless something drastic changes and they fall off, which we have seen happen. What was it? Tennessee last year, they fell off. They were on a roll, and then they fell off hard. So you can fall off pretty fast. So I've got Georgia unless something changes, but I don't have that happening. And then I hate to say it as a Nebraska guy. Well, actually, I hate to say it for two of these teams that are on here, but one of them is Texas. I do have Texas continuing. Obviously, if they lose to Kansas, that's it. They won't. That'll be that. But I don't think they will. I can see your prediction coming true. Either way, it's going to be a shootout. But I think if Texas can stay tough and beat Kansas and prove that they can beat solid ranked programs, they're going to continue that. So they're my number 2. And then my number 3, I'll just stick with teams that we hate as Nebraska fans. Ohio State. I do have Ohio State being that team. They've just been that team. They've been the best team in the Big Ten. Whether we like to admit it or not, they've been that best team in the Big Ten, in my opinion, consistently. Since we've been in the Big Ten, they've been that team. So I've got to give it to Ohio State. And then, you know what? And it's kind of tough because one could say it's only because it was Colorado, but the performance that Oregon put on, I think if there's any team that can say we're coming, it's them, because they've arrived. They're not even weak. It's not. I mean, here's the thing. As much as we saw since Boulder has kind of lost some of its spotlight since that game, and we've seen the memes of Deion saying we come and all that stuff. Here's the thing. If there's a team that could actually say that, it's Oregon, because they have been building up a stacked offense and an absolutely just terrorizing defense. So that Oregon team, I got to give them love. Yes, again, it was against Colorado. Colorado's no slouch, first of all. They do have real talent. And second of all, Oregon played the best game it's played in so long, and they look like a national champion contender. So those are my 4, bro. What about you?
All right. I think we both got the same number 1. I've got Georgia. Georgia number 1. I'm going to put, at the end of the year, I'm going to put Penn State in there over Ohio State and Michigan. I think Penn State's legit. They've got themselves an NFL caliber quarterback, and he's got a few more years of eligibility left, so it'll be interesting to see how he develops. I've got Penn State at 2. I'm also going to change things up. I do not have Texas in it at the end of the year. Give me Washington at number 3. I think Washington's going to be really good. It was really tough between Washington and Oregon because I think both of those teams are really solid programs. So is USC, but I do think Oregon and Washington have better defenses out of the three teams. And then for my fourth team, another really tough pick. But if things transpire the way I think they could, say if Kansas beats Texas, I'm going to go Kansas at 4. They're kind of my Cinderella pick of the year. After seeing what they have done last year, obviously they fell off a little bit toward the end of the year because they ended up hitting a gauntlet. Their schedule is manageable. After this week, I do think Oklahoma is a winnable game too, because Oklahoma is nowhere near where they were before. They're 4-0, but they're not extremely flashy. I'm gonna say that there's gonna be a TCU type team that makes it in. I think they sneak their way in. And then I'm gonna even go as far as the first team out, and I'm gonna say Florida State. Florida State's going to be the first team out at the end of the year. So that's my pick. People may think I'm smoking something, but I do really like what Leipold is doing down in Lawrence, Kansas right now. I think it's some pretty big things.
No, I like those picks. I can see them for sure. I think no one saw TCU coming last year. No one saw that being a team that would be in the playoffs, and then they were. So you never know. You really never know. So definitely plenty more football left to go. And now it's time to transition into our favorite segment. I think we all know what that might be. Take us away, bro.
All right. So this weekend, it's a pretty big matchup. You got the number 2 ranked team in the country, Michigan Wolverines, going to Lincoln at 2:30 on Fox, playing up against our Nebraska Cornhuskers. It's going to be an interesting game. Neither offense is flashy. Both defenses are very solid. It's going to be crazy. So let me break down the stats real quick. So Michigan is averaging 405 total yards a game, 237 passing, 167 yards rushing. Nebraska's is literally the opposite. Nebraska is averaging 124 yards passing a game and 235 on the ground, which is good. Both defenses are pretty solid too. 231 yards allowed for Michigan, 298 for Nebraska. 151 yards passing allowed by Michigan, 251 allowed by Nebraska. And then it comes down to the rushing defenses. 2 of the top 10 rushing defenses in the country are going up against each other here. Michigan allowing 80 yards. Nebraska is only averaging 46, which is number 1 in the country in rush defense. This has the feeling of a old school Big Ten slugfest. It's going to be a low scoring game. The key is, can Nebraska take care of the ball and sustain drives and keep Nebraska's defense off of the field for a bunch of, time? If they can't do that, Michigan is going to tire out that Nebraska defense, and I could see them pulling away late. This is going to be a 2 prediction thing for me. If Nebraska could take care of the ball, I may be sipping the Kool-Aid here. Give me Nebraska 17, Michigan 14. I do think Nebraska will make a couple of unexpected plays on defense. I do think they will limit Michigan's opportunities. It's going to be low scoring. If Nebraska turns over the ball a couple of times, give me Michigan 31, Nebraska 17. I do think it'll be a 2-touchdown game at least. It's going to be low scoring either way it goes. I don't think either team is going to show that much flash. What are your thoughts, man? I think Nebraska, while many people aren't giving Nebraska a legit shot. I do think Nebraska, with their defense, and if they can, run the ball as well they have been the last 4 weeks, I think Nebraska's got a legit shot here.
I think they have a legit shot as well. I share your take on having 2 predictions because honestly, it's all going to be determined by how well can Nebraska protect the ball when we have it, and how well can we take it away when they have it. We have done a pretty solid job defensively this season. We have looked like a pretty solid defensive unit. We have not gone up against a team as high caliber as Michigan, but Michigan's offense isn't really super high caliber. We've looked at them before and seen star talent players, high caliber players. I don't see that same level on that roster this season. Nebraska's defense can absolutely shut that offense down. What it's going to come down to is, can our offense not turn the ball over and not require our defense to spend too much time on the field? All right. If our defense is having to spend time on the field every couple of play, if we're turning the ball over consistently or 3 and outs consistently, that defense is going to tire. Even if we are a strong defense, we're going to tire and break. So it all is determined by our offense. At the end of the day, our offense has to show up. But even if our offense shows up, I share your first prediction of 14-7. I share that. That honestly is what I think one outcome will be. Huskers win in a close, low-scoring game. My flip side is a lot worse than yours, I will say. My flip side is Nebraska. It's close. My flip side is it's 10-10 early. Early as in first half of the game. We get to the end of the second, and we have a turnover, a major turnover, and that sets the tone for the second half. Michigan comes back out and lays it on thick and ends up beating us. I'm going to go with, again, this is a complete flip side prediction, but because of the momentum that will have been lost, I've got Michigan coming back out and winning 42-10. That is only if we had a huge turnover at the end of the first half or there was some momentum shift. But that's my flip side. On one side, I have it being close, 14-17, and on my flip side, I have it being 42-10.
So with my halftime prediction, I've got it as a 3-3 game.
Ooh, okay.
Going into half. I think it's going to be a real defensive barn burner, especially if Nebraska could take care of the ball and they can sustain drives. If they can sustain drives for several minutes and keep that Michigan offense off the field and the defense keeps doing their job, it's going to be super low scoring. It's going to be a traditional defensive Big Ten battle. Because I've alluded to this before. I'm like, even with Nebraska's offense not really having a true identity, even though I think we found our identity now, we are a running football team. The run protection for Nebraska has been really good. The pass protection is a little suspect. But in order to get some big plays downfield, I do think Nebraska is going to have to open up that pass game a little bit. If they have to run it on, RPOs, just play action, if they can get some success running the ball early, I do think they're going to run some plays that'll give Harburg a little bit more, positive, going into the rest of the game. I do think they'll get them into a positive rhythm. At least I hope Satterfield gets them into a positive rhythm. But yeah, it's going to be close. If Nebraska could take care of the ball, which they have done a really good job, by the way, the last couple of weeks at taking care of the ball, I think it's going to be huge. And obviously, the stats for Harburg passing the ball haven't been great. 24-47, 278 yards, 4 touchdowns, but no interceptions. You've got J.J. McCarthy, who has showed flash at times this year. 71 of 89, 915 yards, 8 touchdowns, but he threw 3 interceptions against Bowling Green. And now he's coming into Lincoln, which is going to be a pretty hostile environment And I do think it could be enough to rattle JJ a little bit. And that Nebraska 3-3-5 defense is going to be tough for any team to prepare for because Nebraska can come out in numerous looks. You can't just key in on one specific, look. You have to key in on like 100 different looks. It's crazy how a 3-3-5 can form. So I do think Nebraska will end up getting a couple of turnovers tomorrow. And I do think if everything is good, I think Nebraska pulls off the upset. And we may be talking about a top 25 Nebraska team next week up against Illinois, which is cool. And it'll also get Matt Rhule over the hump. He has yet to beat a ranked team in the regular season. And what better way to start that off than against the number 2 team in the country currently?
Absolutely.
It's crazy. I do think this is going to be a tough, gritty matchup. It'll be exciting, man. It'll be interesting to see how this Nebraska team holds up against a pretty big front of the Michigan offense. They do have a big offensive line. Will Nebraska be able to get pressure? I do think Nebraska will be able to plug up the running lanes pretty well. The question is, can they pressure J.J. McCarthy into making mistakes? If they can, they're going to have to dial up some exotic blitzes because I don't think their defensive linemen per se are going to get the pressure. I think it's going to be more of their linebackers, like sneaking an extra linebacker in there to try and get around the edge. I think it'll be fun, man. Because this Nebraska team is not going to be an easy out for anybody.
Not.
So we'll talk more on, Nebraska, Michigan. We'll probably touch base on it next week on the next episode. Transitioning over, there's an interesting article. Former Nebraska player Kieran Williams basically blasted the Nebraska environment as being too corporate. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Kieran Williams on a tweet is like, today at the game, it felt way too corporate in our locker room for the operations to the staff. No dog, no swagger, no credibility. The vibes were definitely off. The players are making the best of the cards they got. Just my honest opinion. I thought that was interesting because I did not catch that vibe at all in the first 4 weeks of the year. You've got, certain players that definitely have that dog in them, primarily on the defense, and maybe Heinrich Haarberg the last couple of games. What are your takes on this? Because I do think Kieran Williams kind of went off the wall on his take here.
I think for me, it's like, I bet that it is a different environment than when he played, but he last suited up for the Huskers. I mean, it's been over 5 years. It
was with Frost, I think, maybe.
Was it Frost's first season?
Maybe, yeah.
So, yeah, then whatever that means, whether it was his first season or Mike Riley's last season, the environment is way different now. I would probably bet you that it does feel more professional. Maybe that's the word that I would call it, because I do think that Rhule is trying to build up an environment. When we had Osborne, there was a professional. Yeah, our players had swagger, but that's because we were winning. That's because we were winning games. Our team, the team we have now, I don't think we should have a lot of swagger. We need to, again, you need to have confidence, but I guess for me, teams of past, as in recent past, the last few seasons, we've had all this flair, all this flash on social media, on this and on that, and then we've gotten slapped by teams. I don't mind if it's a corporate environment, if it's a professional, if it's a this. We need something to get us back to success. And I think that very well could be the way to do it. A little more professionalism, because there was none. I'm sorry. Now, there was obviously some under Frost because he would have gotten fired a lot sooner. But the amount of professionalism and just the coach presence that Rhule has, the difference between him and Frost, even just when they pan over to him on the sideline, is enormous. So I think the environment is different, but I don't think it's bad. Change is not always a bad thing.
No, it's not. And I'm kind of thought this was kind of interesting. So on this article that you sent me, and it says, the Huskers do indeed not show the kind of swagger that has been all the rage this football season. Rhule hasn't given any speeches about taking anything personally. He tends to go in the opposite direction. Kieran Williams is also not the only former Husker who has voiced displeasure at Rhule being the man in charge. Scott Shanley blasted the hire on social media when Rhule's named head coach. However, since taking the reins in Lincoln, the one claim of Williams that doesn't jive with what other players have said is that it's not welcoming to former players, which is not true. Rhule's obviously welcoming all these other players in. He's welcomed other coaches in too. For his part, Rhule has made it clear that his door is open to those who played before, which is true. He's made that door open to anybody who has been within the program before. So to think that it's not welcoming just because the environment is different than what you played under, it doesn't make it wrong. Like, yeah, you may be getting a different vibe, but you're also in a losing environment. Obviously, the vibe is going to be different. So the fact that he felt the need to criticize Rhule because it was quote-unquote not welcoming just because it was a business-like approach to what they were doing, what the hell is wrong with that? I don't see anything wrong with that. Nebraska obviously needed a big change in how they operated. So, again, I don't understand where he's coming from here. I think he was coming right off of the fucking wall to say that. Pardon my language.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I definitely think
it's just one of those things. Like, seeing stuff like this, it just angers me. Again, pardon my language on that last little bit, but it just saying that it's not welcoming to other players just because it's a different environment than what you played under. It's like, what? What are you saying? Like, obviously it's going to be different because Rhule wants to build a winning environment here. Okay. You did not play in a winning environment. Obviously, there's going to be huge differences, and you may not agree, but to go and put Nebraska on blast on social media is not right.
No, especially being a former player and being, with Williams' case, being such a recent former player, it's not a good look. So not a great look, but obviously not everybody's going to be on board when change happens.
No, and I'm hoping Rhule gets us to the point to where everybody is on the Rhule train, because I do think he will get it right. I mean, if we've seen anything, the dude rebuilt Temple and won back-to-back conference championships with them. He then went to Baylor, who was in a tough situation with the rape allegations and stuff like that amongst the football team. And he got into that, position, and he had to call the parents of the players that were on the team and is like, it's okay if they play for me. Like, he had to reassure everybody. And he had nobody to start out. They started 1-11 in his first year at Baylor. But within 2 years, he had the second best team in the Big 12. He's rebuilt programs. I don't get why people hate on the guy so much. Is it because he had no luck in the NFL when he was the head coach there? Maybe. But it's not the same. It is nowhere near the same coaching in the NFL as it is in college. Because you're dealing with NFL veterans who have been there for 10 plus years, who are making more money than you, that think they got the only say in the room. And I don't think that's a bad take.
No, not at all.
So, obviously, when Rhule was hired on, it was going to be a different approach. And I'm going to embrace a different approach because obviously Nebraska needs a breath of fresher air because we haven't been to a bowl game in 7 years. Still staying on the Nebraska topic. So, Trev Alberts, yesterday, I believe, unveiled a $450 million, makeover to Memorial Stadium, which includes a concourse that goes all the way around the stadium, a complete revamp of both end zones, infrastructure for alcohol, new concession stands, new restrooms. It's going to be a cool place if that all comes to fruition, because obviously Nebraska's Memorial Stadium was in need of a refresh anyway. Because I don't know if I told you this, but going to games in that stadium, it's not exactly the most comfortable thing, because your seats are so close together. Because it's not a seat, it's a bench, and you could be squeezed in between like two people. It's tough. No leg room. So another big thing on that is each seat will have its own seat back. So you'll actually have your own seat in the stadium. The big thing is all these changes are going to cut into the capacity quite a bit. Because right now you can sit 90 to 92,000 fans in that stadium, albeit pretty tight, but you can sit 90,000 people in there. All these changes would drop Nebraska's stadium seating capacity to the mid-70,000s, which I think is a pretty good number. That's a pretty good number.
Yeah, that's still a lot of people.
It's a lot of people getting, 75, 76,000 people in that stadium.
That's a lot. I mean, yeah, that is a lot of people. But what I will say is it does cut into how many people can go to games, but I still think it's worth it. I still think those renovations, it needs that. And for us to compete as college football advances into the future, for us to compete with those big SEC schools and those ever-growing other Big Ten schools, having something like this is huge. And talk about all of the upgrades and the new sports facility that we're getting, everything, then that new complex, all of that stuff is going to bring in recruits like crazy. Those are things that those athletes want, those recruits want to see. It's aesthetically pleasing, and also the benefits you're getting from it are crazy. So it's going to be big. That the upgrades are going to be only positive, even though the numbers drop. 70,000 is still
quite a few.
Yeah, it's still a stadium.
Yeah, it's still going to be a loud place, no matter who's playing in that stadium. The fact that they're talking about selling alcohol at games now, I think is pretty cool. So I can go to a game and have a beer or two. Yeah. And then the big thing for me too is having a concourse that goes and wraps the stadium.
Yeah.
It just makes things way easier because you don't have to worry about what gate you're going into. You can just go in whatever gate you want to, and you can walk around the concourse. And then you can find your seat from there. It makes it a more fan-friendly experience.
Absolutely.
That's a good way to put it. So I'm excited for this. So the improvements will also mean the displacement of 23,000 fans at South Stadium for at least one season beginning in 25. plus a permanent reduction of the stadium seating capacity to the mid 70,000s. Seat backs obviously are huge. I want a seat back with a cup holder. That's what I want. Instead of sitting my cup on the ground and like trampling over it, because the last thing I want is to buy a $6 cup of Mountain Dew and spill it and it goes through the cracks and all of a sudden the people below me are getting a Mountain Dew shower or something. Not a good experience. I kind of know from experience. So
I've been there too.
I'm for these renovations. Obviously we'll talk more on this. It looks like these renovations will be done 2026 to 2027. If they get approved, which I think they will. So again, we'll talk more as more comes out on this. Let's transition over to our last segment. It is about Damian Lillard getting traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. Why don't you take it away, man? What do you think on this trade?
Yeah, so first of all, I didn't see this coming, and I don't think a lot of people did. This was something that lots of people thought him going to the Heat was set in stone. I started to believe that he was just not going to go anywhere. I'm like, okay, maybe he's just going to wait till the trade deadline or something. Maybe they're waiting to see, whatever. It's all good. But comes out that he's going to the Bucks of all teams, and it was a big trade, a 3-team trade. First and foremost, obviously Giannis and Dame is going to be electric. You are pairing up the most dominating player of the last 5 years, the most physically dominating player of the last 5 years with a closer and an offensive force like Dame. That is the makings for a Kobe Shaq type of matchup. Now, I don't think they're going to be as good as Kobe and Shaq. I'm not making those comparisons, but it's going to give you that type of star power and that type of team up. And we haven't seen that type of team up in the East. Having that type of star power in the East is huge. So yeah, it's huge for the Bucks, but at the same time, you're giving up depth. They traded their depth away to get Damian Lillard because that's the only way you're going to get a player like him nowadays is if you trade your depth. If you give up depth or a superstar key asset, you've got to give up big to get big. And that's what they did. And that's what they did. And on the flip side, the Suns, they're the real deal now. They are the real deal. Parting ways with DeAndre Ayton was huge because is he a bad player? No. And actually, him going to Portland might end up being great for him in his career. Getting away from Phoenix might be great for him in his career because that cloud was over him there. So it's good for everybody. DeAndre Ayton's on a new team, and now the Suns got a new center, a new big man in Nurkic, who's a way better option than DeAndre Ayton, in my opinion. So they have built their depth up. So it's a win-win. Both the Suns and the Bucks, it's a win-win for those two teams.
The question for you, do you think with this trade, do you think the Suns, you already said it, they're the real deal. Do you think the Suns have what it takes this year to win the Western Conference?
Before this trade, I thought they did. And after this trade, I absolutely think they do. I think we're looking at the Bucks and the Suns. We're looking at the two teams that are going to win their conferences that completed this trade. The Bucks are absolutely my favorite in the East now, and the Suns are my favorite in the West. So this trade very well may have completed the top two teams or the top team in both of their conferences. So that's my thinking. I think that this does make them contenders. Not that they already weren't. I just think this solidifies it.
Like, you look at Portland, too. I don't think Portland's going to be bad after this trade. They got Jrue Holiday, DeAndre Ayton, and Toumani Camara. I think those are pretty good players that Portland is receiving. They got more depth now. I do think Portland could be a top half Eastern Conference team as well.
I'm with you. And something actually really, really interesting about Jrue Holiday is Jrue Holiday isn't going to remain a trailblazer for sure. There is a rumor that the Lakers, the 76ers, there's a lot of teams that are flirting with the idea of trading for him. So next episode, we might see Rhule Holiday on a different team, and that could help make them a contender. But if he stays in Portland, which I think he's going to stay in Portland. I think there's all this talk about Rhule Holiday going to another team in a trade, but I do think that he's going to end up staying in Portland. I don't think he's going to move. I think that the pieces Portland picked up were it was on purpose. It was very purposeful. There was purpose for who they picked up trying to build that team. You're trying to build a team around Scoot. Scoot's going to be a great player. I think, honestly, I could see him being the player that wins Rookie of the Year. Yes, there's Victor, and Victor's going to be great, but Scoot is going to be the real deal. I think maybe we see Scoot and Ayton be that all-star duo. Maybe we see that we could see connection, and we could see Rhule Holiday fit really well. Now, the Celtics are a big rumored team for trading for Rhule Holiday. So there's a lot of teams that are interested in courting Rhule Holiday because he absolutely brings talent and he brings championship level IQ. So he is that player that you want, but I can see him staying with Portland, even though they say he's on the block. I think he's going to stay with Portland.
I think so too. And I think that bolsters up the Portland roster a little bit more, and they could be a very interesting team coming into this NBA season. NBA season's less than a month away from tipping off. I think NBA preseason stuff is going to get underway within the next week or two. Is that right?
Yeah, it starts on the 5th of October, first preseason game. So that's next week, right?
Yep, that is next week.
Crazy.
That is Thursday, I believe.
Wow, it's crazy.
Yeah, so it's here, man. It should be an exciting time. Do you have anything else that you would like to add to it, or?
No, just with the NBA season starting up, make sure to tune in to Purple and Gold Zone. That will be on our channel, the Connor and Heffernan Show channel. Make sure to tune into that. It'll also be on Spotify. That will start up within the next 2 weeks. I don't know exactly if it'll be next week or the week after, but be ready for that. That'll start with the NBA season. And then also well beyond the arc, we are actually currently looking for a new co-host for that show. Our plan is to start when the season starts. That's under a month away. So we are looking for a co-host. If you are interested, reach out to me. You can reach out to me over our TikTok at the Connor and Heffernan Show. You can reach out to me over Instagram at the Connor and Heffernan Show. Reach out to me if you're interested in potentially being a co-host for Well Beyond the Arc. We don't have a set date or time. We're willing to change that for what we need to do, but looking for that co-host. So make sure to reach out to me if you have any interest in that. But other than that, that kind of takes care of us. We will be live, just so you guys know, we will be going live within the next few episodes. Our goal is to potentially go live next episode if possible. So be ready for that. That'll be kind of a new format that we add to our show as we go forward. So be looking for a live episode coming soon.
Looking forward to it, man. Obviously, thank you all for watching and listening. Keep up to date on what we have going on our Twitter, our Facebook, and our TikTok. Thank you to the Yankee and the Brit for letting us on their channel as well. Super awesome of them. If you guys are listening from Yankee and the Brit, like I said earlier in the episode, make sure you click on the link in the description below. You'll find the full episode on our YouTube channel, The Connor and Heffernan Show. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you all next week.